Hello and welcome. Ironically, a lot has been happening since the Disney parks have closed. And by this point, they are reopening now and people are flooding back as much as they can with the limited capacity in place. There's been a lot of news from Disney that's come out before they actually open their gates again. And if you're familiar with this channel, then you understand why I'm upset. Splash Mountain is changing its theme to Princess and the Frog, and before it gets too controversial, let me just state that these thoughts, even though they're my opinion, doesn't reflect anything regarding what's happening in today's society. I'm looking at it strictly from a historical point, and I'll explain that as we go further on. I love history. I love Disney history. That's one of my favorite things about the parks, is how rich it is. The company in general, and how far back it's gone, that Walt Disney created it back in the 1920s and was able to capitalize on the industry in the 30s and 40s, which is some of my favorite time periods in looking back of nostalgia. I wasn't alive during that time, obviously, but I've always loved the aesthetic and the pop culture from those times. So anything related to that time, I am always in favor of. I'm still forever bitter about the Great Movie Ride closing. I meant it seriously when I said forever bitter. I love Princess and the Frog. I think it's fantastic. The music, the idea of setting it in New Orleans in the 20s is fantastic, and I love the 20s as well, but I would have loved to have seen them get a different ride instead of just throwing it over to Splash Mountain. And this isn't going to be the same thing as I felt about Great Movie Ride, because Great Movie Ride, the difference example wise, is that was built for Hollywood studios, for MGM studios, and that's why I'm still forever bitter about that one, because literally you took away the park's identity. Here, Splash Mountain was not built in the beginning. It wasn't made until the 80s, so it's not a classic, and in terms of that, it's not that big a deal. But I still feel sad that we're seeing it go, and it is not about racism. There's no racism, in my opinion. Originally, I did do a video back when I was doing my reviews for all the Disney films, 365 days of reviews, and I did a video about Song of the South. It is still an important feature according to Walt Disney, because Walt Disney did put a lot of work into it. Not regarding the racism of it, not regarding anything, but technical vision. Let's just talk about that. Technical vision, what they were able to achieve with Song of the South, put a lot more footprints down to achieve greatness, like Mary Poppins. Bedknobs and Broomsticks even was part of that too. There's a lot of films that they were able to create by experimenting with Song of the South.
Zip, zip-a-dee-doo-dah, zip-a-dee-yay.
My, oh my, what a wonderful day. Plenty of sunshine head my way. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. Mr. Bluebird's on my shoulder.
It's the truth. It's actual. Everything is satisfaction.
And I will admit that when I was doing my reviews, even though you can torrent it online and you can find it online, it still is banned, and it is very hard to find it. So when I was reviewing it, I did watch it one time, but then I wasn't able to find it again, so it's been a while. So I think I even mentioned it back then that it wasn't a true point of view because I was going from a memory base. However, if you take a look at the other companies, such as Warner Brothers, that have had a lot of racist cartoons back in the 30s, when I'm not saying it was right, because it wasn't right, but we can't look at it from a right or wrong lens here. We have to look at it from a point where people were living during the time, and that's what they thought was okay to do. It's not okay to do, but we can't erase history, because erase history, then we are prone to make the same mistakes. And that's what's important, and that's why I think it's important to still keep the idea of Splash Mountain and keep the idea of Song of the South alive.
They should follow in the footsteps of what Warner Brothers did years ago and put a disclaimer on explaining what was the issue, like they do here, for example.
However, the Looney Tunes and their irreverent brand of humor are products of their time. Unfortunately, at that time, racial and ethnic differences were caricatured in ways that may have embarrassed and even hurt people of color, women, and ethnic groups. Now, nobody intended it, but that's what happened. But removing these inexcusable images and jokes from this collection would be the same as saying they never existed. So they are presented here to accurately reflect a part of our history that cannot and should not be ignored.
What I wish they would do is make it like they did for other films that are considered classics. Cough, Birth of a Nation, cough. That is a terrible, terrible film about the KKK. However, it's considered a Criterion Collection classic. And if you're not familiar with films, the Criterion Collection is one of the highest ranks that you can get for your film. And that is a very, very, very worse film that's available to be shown compared to Song of the South. I said it in the previous video when I talked about it, and I still stand by this. I feel like we need these films to stay alive for the sake to look back at what was wrong and to not make the mistakes again. And so in terms of the ride, because the ride is what we need to focus on today, the ride itself isn't that big a deal. And I know that like I said, I won't be as upset about it. And Princess and the Frog does seem really great, but I'm more afraid that with the beginning of them shutting the ride down to switch it out, that we're going to lose the beginnings of Disney. And obviously not everything is great, not everything's fantastic, but I feel like it's so important from a historical standpoint to look back where we came from. I know the famous quote is, "It's all was started by a mouse." Never forget that it all started by a mouse. And that's really great, but I know that there's so many other films that Walt Disney Company has done back in the 1930s and 40s that are not known anymore. And I'm so grateful, at least with Disney Plus, that they have been putting them out there so it is a lot more accessible. But there's still a lot of lost media that's going to continue to move forward as we get older and age. And I'm very sad about that, because I feel like the media was all passion projects for everyone, and I'm very nostalgic and I love old film. I love everything from the 20th century, especially different decades, and there's so many things that you want to keep alive, like it's art. Because I feel like with them taking the ride down, it's going to just shut the box down in the vault, and a lot of films are not coming out of the vault afterwards. So that's part of my thoughts about it. I do love the theming. I do love the idea of Briar Rabbit, Briar Fox, and Briar Bear. They're just cute characters. I just hope that they're still able to be relevant in the parks. Like, that's my wish. With them changing it over to Princess and the Frog, I still hope that they will continue to put Briar Rabbit, Briar Bear, and Briar Fox somewhere else. I understand and I empathize and I sympathize that obviously you don't want to be showing something that is harsh to a community. I want everyone to be equal. I really do. And I know I feel like with the last couple of videos I've done, it's been very political, but I think at the same time, controversial, I feel that we do need to discuss certain things, even though I do want to keep things as positive as possible, and Disney as a whole is very positive as possible, and it's all about the magic and the fantasy, and it's fantastic, and I really admire and appreciate that, and that keeps me motivated. But I also feel bad losing a lot of characters that back then people put their heart and soul into, and they thought they were doing the best they could. So that's one element of my sadness of us losing Splash Mountain. I never really rode it that often because of the fact that you get wet on it. The ride itself as a log flume was fun, but I didn't like getting wet and having to go around the park for the rest of the day soaked. But then I was able to get smart and was able to bring a poncho with me all the time, and then I was able to be good and could actually enjoy the ride. I got into the ride late in the game, and I also felt like there's always such a long wait time for it because of the fact that the parks are hot and people don't mind getting wet on the ride. But for me, I felt like I would rather spend my time waiting for things like Haunted Mansion, which are favorites of mine, and even People Mover, because it's relaxing and there's never a wait. The second point that I do want to put forward too is the fact that now, because of the fact that Splash Mountain is closing, the demand for the merchandise is very high. I know for myself, now that I know it's closing, that I definitely want to get a piece or two for the fact alone that I want to keep the characters alive. I mean, you can kind of see behind me my wall of merchandise and memorabilia. Even though a lot of it is catered to my favorites, I do want to keep things historical as well. So like, not like it's a big deal, but example, Flubber is not a well-known character anymore, and I was able to find this old piece from the Disney store back in the 90s, and which is still recent to me. I feel like the 90s have never left, but in reality, they're almost 30 years old, so they are also vintage. And Disney is our fantasy land that we like to go to have fun and to escape from the real world because we need it more than anything. And now that the parks have opened up again, and I'll be watching from up here to see how things continue, thankfully, because we have the internet and I'm able to actually see how they are from all the different vloggers down there, and I would love to go down there, but I live in New Jersey, so I won't be going for a long time because we're not allowed and Floridians aren't allowed up in our state, so I will be stuck here. But obviously I really do want to be able to get part of the merch from Disney for history and just to have a piece of that before it all fades away. And I hate so much that all of these eBay resellers are going to the parks and buying everything and selling it for obnoxious prices. Can we please stop this? Because it's so infuriating to see. I mean, all these pictures, look at this, and this, and this. Like, come on! I love for the nostalgia factor of it. Anything that has a specific date or anything that's special, that's closing and won't be around in the parks anymore or won't be a film anymore, I want to be able to keep it for myself. And it's literally just for myself. I don't have any intention to selling it, and I don't have any intention to make a profit like these people are. And I feel like that's the most terrible thing ever, that they're literally just doing this because they know that they can make money for it because it's going away and it makes it more valuable, and it sucks so much. And I wish that they could get stopped. I hope that in the future that Disney will stop it and put a limit onto things like they do with other limited releases, that even on the website, so they have certain things that you can only limit 2 or limit 10. The magic bands are limited, the pins are limited, and like anything special edition t-shirts are limited, and it needs to happen. And this shows it because that is terrible. And I feel bad for all the cast members that had to deal with these people, honestly. And it's a shame. It's a shame. Like, I want to stay positive, I really do, but I gotta be real when it comes to these thoughts, and this is probably one of the most serious videos that I'll have on this conversation. And I just hope that everyone is safe and everyone's healthy down there with the cast members. I am sad about Splash Mountain, but I will not, like, I'll get over it. I know I'll get over it so much easier compared to others. And I do hope that they do well with Princess and the Frog. It is a fantastic film. It's very, very underrated. I do love it. I'm excited to see them infuse the music of it. And I'll come around to it being with Splash Mountain. Honestly, I'm just more excited for Tiana's Restaurant. Like, that's perfect because that literally ties into her story. I just hope that they don't completely wipe Splash Mountain and Song of the South off the map. Like I said, historical wise, I feel like it's important for us to be able to access. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I will link the link below to my Song of the South review. Like I said, it's not fully accurate anymore because of the fact that I only watched it one time, but I feel like my thoughts are still the same pretty much, that we need to keep things alive in order for us not to go back and repeat things again. We're gonna get back to happy videos next, I promise. We're gonna get back away from this controversial political talk, but I still feel like it was an important discussion to start. And as always, I hope you guys have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.